In this video, we're actually going to look at the assembly and installation of the actual 3-point hitch component for the X758. We, in the last video, installed the retrofit kit, which was more of a pain than I would like it to have been. But we're going to move on now and get the rest of this done. Let's jump into it. So pardon, I have all the parts kind of laid out here as I was trying to figure things out earlier. So just kind of ignore it. So first we're going to assemble the depth stop and hitch rock shaft assembly. So note, hitch assembly cannot be installed on the machine unless a square nut is threaded as far as possible on the depth control rod. Thread the heavy duty square nut as far as possible on the depth control rod B. So this is our heavy duty square nut. Here is our rock shaft. I need to orient this the way they have it here. Okay. And then this is our depth stop. So this end is going to get a roll pin, it looks like. Well, we're going to put this on first. On as far as it'll go. Install the painted depth stop pivot onto the rock shaft D. So that is going to be this one. Looks like there's two pivots. This one's painted. So we're going to put that in here. Insert the threaded depth control rod into the depth stop pivot. So we're going to put this through here. Install slotted spring pin in the hole in the threaded end of the depth control rod until it is centered. So they call it a spring pin. I call it a roll pin. Whatever. I'm gonna have to do a bit of hammering. Prefer not do it on this though. Get a block of wood. That way I'm not hammering my threads into other steel. Alright, got her centered. Next we're going to install the depth stop pivot on the depth control rod with the countersink on pivot facing the heavy duty square nut. So this guy, countersink, is going to go towards the square nut. Important, avoid damage. Do not crush the spring. Depth stop pivot must rotate on the depth control rod after tightening self-locking M8 flange lock nut. You must use the self-locking lock nut at this point. Note, position the slotted spring pin between rock shaft triangular plates to keep the depth control rod from turning while tightening self-locking M8 flange lock nut. So we'll pull this back all the way. So next we're going to install the spring and the M8 lock nut. So we have this pulled back so that the pin will stop this from sliding as we tighten this. We'll put the spring on there. And then the stop nut. So I'm going to put this on. This is a 13mm socket. I'm just going to put it on until the threads meet the top of the nut. Until you start really feeling just some resistance. That should be good. There's a little bit of movement there. So it says tighten until one thread shows. We'll do just a hair more. That should be fine. All right, now I think we're gonna move back to the tractor. So at the back of the tractor, we're gonna install the 3-point hitch assembly, or the rock shaft. There's a note, make sure that the cylinder that we relocated is fully retracted. So if it's not, start up, your tractor. It says push the upper hydraulic control level forward, that'll retract it. So place the left and right reinforcement plates on both ends of rock shaft with slot B on top rear position. So these are our support pieces. They want this slot top rear. So here we have our rock shaft. And it looks like it's going to be setting this way. So we're going to slide these on like that and like that. And install the right side of the rock shaft onto the right frame hole. Position the depth stop pivot under the slotted hole in the left frame bracket. I'm not going to get too far ahead of myself here. So that's going to go into frame hole. And then this will go sit on the left side. And then let's see, position the depth stop pivot. Okay, so the pivot down here is gonna come, it's actually up from the other side like this. Okay, that's gonna need to go on first. Okay, so first off, when you put this in, this needs to be rotated in this orientation. Turn this down, and then at the hole way in the back, which I don't know if you can see it on the frame, that'll sit in, and then you can rotate the rest of the rock shaft in. So that was step 4, position the left side into the left frame hole. Line up the holes on the reinforcing plates on the left and right frames. Install 2 bolts and 2 nuts from inside each frame. I had some technical difficulties with hardware, so our next step is to bolt down these plates. Well, loosely install those plates with 4 of these M8 carriage bolts and 4 of these M10 carriage bolts. The hardware though isn't lining up to what the instructions are saying. It's saying for the M8 nuts to use 4 serrated ones, so these being the serrated, but my kit only came with 2. So I had these 2 smooth ones, which I ended up using on the lift strap. However, I come to find out, well, I only have 2 other M8s left, so that's not gonna work. There was 2 other random nuts in the kit that I can't even figure out what they're to. They don't fit on anything. So actually what I ended up doing, the 2 nuts that came off that U-bolt ended up working. So I put those 2 on the strap, and I'm gonna use these ones for what they are here. So essentially, we just gotta orient these to where the holes line up, like that, and bolt everything down. So, seems kind of odd because there's not, well, I guess there's room when you move the rock shaft some. Boy, they make all of this really freaking complicated to get into. So I got all those loosely installed. Next, we need to, let's see, install the depth stop retainer and screw into the frame hole to lock depth stop pivot in place. So you need to make sure that that's in place, and it's gonna go on there. There's a hole. This is a self-tapping screw. It's gonna go into that hole and lock it in place. So I'm gonna do that, and then we'll be back because I'm just gonna be in the way. All right, I don't think you can see it, but I got that installed. One thing I do want to point out, there is this connector. It just has a jumper cable or a jumper wire in there. It was hung up in there. I mentioned it earlier when we were installing the cylinder again. When you put that in there and lock that, what do they call it? Limiter. I forget the name. This gets locked in there and you're not gonna be able to get it out without having to take that out. So remove this, just hang it down. We'll tie it up later. But that'll save you from having to do that later. So next we're gonna be putting the cylinder rod through everything back here. So we're gonna line up the left cylinder rod with the slots in the inner and outer rock shaft arm triangular plates and slot on the frame. We're going to install a shoulder pin from the outside towards the inside of the machine through washer, outer rock shaft arm plate, cylinder rod, inner rock shaft arm plate, and mower lift strap. Now it said at the end of the last step also to start the machine up and make sure that the hole is 64 millimeters from the face of the unit or from the face of the cylinder. But it looked like it was already about that, just being all the way in. So we're going to try it out. So there is a hole on the side of the frame that we're going to begin inserting everything through. So through the rock shaft, through the cylinder, something's hanging up. There we go. Through the other rock shaft, and then went through a little too quick. The mower lift strap. And then insert lock nut on threaded end of shoulder pin. So this is the only other nut that I'm gonna have that's any different. It's not even a lock nut. So I'm just gonna put some blue thread locker on this and tie it down. All right, so a 19 millimeter, you can get in here, hold that pin in place when you put this nut on. If you don't, if you don't have a lock nut, thread lock it. But it'll be 15 millimeter then to tighten that down. I think it's supposed to slide a little bit. Yeah, it's gonna need to slide, so I'm gonna leave it a little bit loose. And I'll check it periodically. I can't imagine it would come off with that on there. If anything, if I have an issue with it, I'll just look and try to find an actual lock nut for on there. So with that, next we're gonna install left and right rock shaft bushings and bearings on the end of rock shaft and onto frame holes. Install snap rings on the rock shaft end and seat snap ring in the shaft groove. Tighten flange nuts C and D on the left and right sides of the frame. So we got a couple, they call these bushings and bearings, I guess. And then these are our snap rings, of course. You need to grab a snap ring pliers. But we'll just slide these in, and they are slotted, so they'll only go in with one direction. And then this will be an external, so Set those to external, and we'll install our snap ring. You'll see it better on the other side when I do the other side. And that is locked in. So for this side, we'll put our bearing in. And then put on our snap ring. Make sure that's seated. All right, it is. Good to go. And then we're gonna tighten up all our bolts. Getting down to our final steps here, next is to assemble the draft links. So first, lay out the 2 draft links with chains attached. Note, remove excess paint from the yoke end of the chain to improve the fit of the 8mm drilled pin. It may be necessary to assemble the yoke, nut, and eye bolt as shown. 2, install yoke end of the chain from one draft link to the tab hole of the opposite draft link using drilled pin and small spring locking pin. Note, adjustable lift link must go on the right side of the machine. Okay. So I'm gonna get these out of the way. So we're gonna set them like that. The chain gets, let's see. Ah, that's what those goofy nuts are for. So we have that guy. All right, so these 2 nuts I originally thought didn't go to anything. They're actually jam nuts for the chains. So I must have been missing a couple of bolts from, or nuts from the factory, either that or I lost them. Well, they're not lying when they said there's some paint on here. So the paint on these ends of these chains here is really thick, and I can't fit the yoke or these nuts on there at all. So what I'm doing is to clean them out, I'm using just a die. This is a 5/16 24. So if you're looking to, you know, clean yours out like this rather than trying to either put it in some sort of solvent or paint stripper or whatever, you can get, you know, a 5/16 24 tap, or sorry, die. Big difference. Nice clean threads. Hopefully these will thread on there now. Pretty good. This was the one that I had put on the, or tried putting on the other part. So the threads might be a little messed up on it, but I'll make it work. Now our yoke slides on there nice. And repeat. All right, now that we got those threads cleared up, we can get back to this. So we need to take the chains, and I'm gonna spread these out as evenly and straight as possible. And they'll go to the opposing side with this pin, and then a small spring clip. And that was the easiest step all night. Okay, so install yoke end of the chain from one draft link to the tab hole the opposite using drill. No, adjustable lift link must go on the right side of the machine. Install lift links on draft links using M12 by 50 carriage bolts and M12 lock nuts. So this is going to be the right side. So this is our adjustable link. That's going to go on that side. The other one, of course, will be on the other. So that through. This is a nylon lock nut. And let me grab some tools, get these tightened down. All right, 18 millimeter sockets will get you where you need to be. And I just have it to where the edge of that. So it says tighten lock nuts on arm until all joint clearance is eliminated. Okay, so it actually does want you to squeeze those down. I didn't think it would want you to squeeze them down, but I guess we have to. That's pretty close. I'm gonna call that good. That seems too tight. That just does not move whatsoever. Alright, I think I'm happy with that. It says till all clearance is eliminated. I feel like that's probably not the smartest thing. I mean, this has to be able to move a little bit. But then it says next, lift link should move freely after tightening lock nuts. Makes no sense whatsoever. But neither does any of this. All right, now we're gonna go back to the tractor. All right, next we need to install these L brackets. So there's a note, if you have an all-wheel steer model, you have to install the cap screws from the bottom up. So this direction. But we're gonna install the angle brackets with the 4 screws and lock nuts. So they are gonna go here. And then on the other side, but I'm gonna put some Loctite on. Actually, no, they don't need Loctite because these have lock nuts. Easy peasy. This back one may have to go up from the bottom due to the transaxle getting in the way, so we'll have to go up from the bottom on that one, and then I'll just have to hopefully find, should have an 18 millimeter wrench. Actually, I probably don't. I like the one side that I don't. That's what an adjustable's for. All right, next is, there's a note, if click and go brackets used, use the shoulder pin from the click and go kit in the next step. I don't have a click and go, so I'll be using whatever's in the kit. Install right and left draft links on the hitch plate brackets using the 15.9 by 64 millimeter drilled pin from outside of hitch inward. Alright, so we got our draft links, we got our pins, and I believe we're using these spring clips. Set this up in there. There's one side in. There's our other side in. Install lift links using the same size pin into the rock shaft. So these ones I know are kind of tight. All right, they just need a little broken loose. This one will probably be a bit weird until I get it adjusted, but there are our lift links. All right, install PTO shield if you took that off before. And that is it. That is our 3-point hitch. I'm surprised it didn't say anything. Did it say anything about putting the top link in? Oh, it did, okay. I missed it. Use the same pin there again and install the center draft link. All right, and now we have it. Our 3-point hitch. There we have it, the assembly of the Cat 1 limited 3-point hitch for the X700 series. Hopefully this was a really detailed, or at least helpful enough to anybody that's trying to assemble this thing, having trouble, or even just wanting to see what they may be getting into should they get this. I gotta say, overall, the quality of the kit itself, really great. Really impressed with how heavy duty everything in the back here is. My only complaint really is just like the fittings, and then the fact that some of the hardware I got wasn't right. I have 2 extra 10mm nuts left over that I think probably should have been the 8mm ones. So I don't know, maybe there's just a little bit of a screw up somewhere in the assembly line or however that works, but not the biggest deal. I made it work, I guess. Luckily, the same size hardware was on that U-bolt. But other than that, any questions or anything, please let me know. I'll gladly respond. If I missed something, let me know. I'll go back, look, whatever. I want to be as much help as I can with this thing, because there's not a whole lot out there on this hitch, surprisingly. So at that, thanks for watching. Have a good one.